More people that use it, the better.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Chifley.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the Minister now classes 10% seats as marginal, it's an interesting reflection of how much trouble they think they're in. Given the splendour of Prime Minister Abbott's great work in leading your government. I rise to speak on behalf of residents I represent in this place to voice their and my concern about the way in which SBS managed the production and promotion of its program Struggle Street. Last week in the House, I raised my concern that the production company responsible for Struggle Street, Keogh Films, failed to obtain informed consent of the program participants. These were experienced filmmakers and TV broadcasters dealing with inexperienced and vulnerable participants who weren't provided with copies of the release forms once they were signed. Participants who were not offered independent legal advice before consenting to be filmed. Is he concerned by the ethical breaches I outlined in the House last week? Has he raised these breaches with SBS? Does he intend to follow this matter up? And can he report back on the outcome of these inquiries? I also asked the Minister if he supports the actions of the public broadcaster in threatening legal action directed entirely to the Mayor of Blacktown City Council, action that, again, concentrates on the individual, not on the council itself, because the Mayor dare raise serious concerns about the way the program was produced and promoted. Does the Minister believe it's appropriate public broadcasters attempt to strong-arm public officials in this way, and would the Minister personally accept similar legal action targeting him, given his recent criticisms of the conduct of experienced journalists in another public broadcaster, the ABC? And on this point I ask, why does he feel it's more important to object to the way that Emma Alberici and Lee Sales hold public officials to account on their respective programs, but then claim he can't influence the decisions of the SBS board when they blatantly demean and ridicule my constituents, some of them in personally vulnerable circumstances, in the way they did via their promotions for Struggle Street? Next question. It's nearly 2 years since the House of Reps Infrastructure and Communications Committee brought down their report into the IT pricing regimes imposed on businesses and consumers. Does the Minister intend to respond to this report by the time Apple brings in iPhone 7? Finally, and on another matter the Minister is well aware of, the significant interest that exists, particularly among sports fans, for free-to-air TV being broadcast in high-definition quality. Earlier this year I raised this matter in the House, so I understand the Minister has undertaken a public consultation process on this matter. Can he inform the House on the status of these consultations, and can sports fans expect to watch the NRL and AFL grand finals in the splendour of HD quality this year?
I call the Minister.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I just want to remind the honourable member of a provision in the SBS Act, subsection 11, subsection 3. The Minister must not give a direction in relation to the content or scheduling of programs to be broadcast. The Act makes it very clear that it is the SBS Board, not the Parliament or the Minister, which is responsible for programming and editorial decisions. It's the duty of the Board, the SBS Board, to ensure, by means of its programming policies, that the gathering and presentation by the SBS of news and information is accurate and is balanced over time and across the schedule of programs broadcast, and to be aware of and responsive to community needs and opinions on matters relevant to the Charter. Now, that's the context in which we are operating. So, the honourable member is entitled to ask me to, if he wishes, to intervene with the editorial decisions or programming decisions of the SBS, but he knows very well that this is just a rhetorical point. I have no power to do so, nor should I have any power to do so. And the same applies to the ABC. And as I've said many times, the media policies of Vladimir Putin are no more admirable than his foreign policy. We don't want to be living in a country where the government of the day can direct the public broadcasters as to what to say. Now, having said that, the boards are responsible to manage their services. They do have, and I'm talking about both public broadcasters now, they do have an obligation to make sure that their news and current affairs are accurate and impartial. They do have an obligation to comply with their charter and the various broadcasting codes. And I understand and I empathise with what the honourable member has said about the resentment in his community about Struggle Street. It was a very hard-hitting program. I would say its critical review was overall very positive. But if any people portrayed in the documentary or the representatives believe that there's been breach of standards or codes or the SBS's charter, then they should complain to the SBS, and if they're not happy with that, of course, go to ACMA. It's just, I mean, I get, as the minister, as honourable members would imagine, I get hundreds of emails urging me to do something, often quite contradictory things, to the ABC or SBS. Sometimes I get an email saying that, no, they've been too far to the left, followed by one saying they've been too far to the right. I get the full gamut, and the answer is always the same. Now, I would say, though, that the boards have to take their responsibilities very seriously. Now, in terms of the matter about spectrum and the use of spectrum by broadcasters, we have a spectrum review underway, as you know, and the consultation papers have been released. The reform directions are clear. We're obviously consulting with the industry and the community, but the rationale for having restrictions on the way in which an HD or, let's say, high definition or standard definition channels can be broadcast is really no longer there. And as a matter of principle, broadcasters should be able to determine whether they broadcast in standard definition or high definition. The requirement to broadcast the primary channel in standard definition was obviously made at a time when many Australians, a majority of Australians, in fact, only had standard definition sets, and that's obviously no longer the case. So I trust that will give the honourable member some comfort, but the government generally wants to rationalise and provide greater clarity and freedom for the use of spectrum, obviously consistent with protecting the public interest, and have regulations that are less prescriptive and less restrictive of innovative uses of spectrum.
I thank the Minister.